All right, we are on. So welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Guidelines, the show where we go beyond the boardroom and behind the business card. I get to host today. My name is Jason Maxam, and I'm here with my business partner, Ryan Speltz. And today, we're not just talking about hustle or growth or leadership. What we're talking about is legacy. Because what good is scaling a company if we're shrinking at home, right? So we're striving to build something meaningful behind closed doors, and we'll talk about what it really takes to kind of show up fully, not just as a CEO or a founder, but as a parent, as a partner, a son, or a daughter. So this is the side of entrepreneurship we don't really always talk about, and it may just be the most important. Ryan and I have talked about this in the past, but I think it's a good thing to share with our audience because I know there's a lot of hustlers out there that may be struggling at home or may be able to kind of separate that work-life balance. And so that's kind of what I want to get it into today. So Ryan, like your setup, man. So you finished your little Creative First mortgage back there, painted. Looks awesome, dude. Really does.
It's we finished this side. If we look the other way, there's quite a bit to do, but we're working section by section. Obviously I do quite a bit of video content, so it's creating some different spaces inside the corporate office here and getting it to get to look pretty good. So thanks, appreciate that.
Well, and the good thing is I get to see. I've got my glasses on today. That's just what happens when you get older. You'll get there soon, Ryan. Don't worry. Let's get into it. So I wanted to really pick your brain, Ryan. I didn't give you any of these questions ahead of time. I want my audience to know that because I think it's important for Ryan just to kind of share from the heart what I already know he's feeling and what we've talked about in the past. But I'd really like to kind of get your initial thoughts as I ask you these questions. So are you ready?
Yeah, let me take a drink of water because apparently I'm on the spot.
Oh yeah, you're on the spot today, my friend. My first question, we hear about work-life balance all the time. And I wanted to ask you, what boundaries, if any, have you had to put in place in your life to essentially protect your time and your presence with your spouse or your child?
Yeah, this is something that over the course of my career has been one way. And then now that no one's in the picture, it's changed quite a bit. So within the last 9 months, we've gone through where the boundaries were non-existent and it was kind of free for all as a newborn is. You're just learning how to take care of that scenario and recognizing that as a business owner can be difficult because you kind of do feel like you're being pulled away from your family a bit. And the term work-life balance gets thrown around quite a bit. And I really like to call it work-life harmony because it is an ebb and flow, right? Sometimes we're going to be more in the family. Sometimes we're going to be more in the business. And really, as long as we're doing the business for the right reasons, that can be a good situation, right? We're diving into the business and creating something. You mentioned legacy in the intro. That's something that while it may not last past the next generation, it's still something that we have to think about as fathers, especially, and husbands. So as far as the boundaries go, it's just setting up specific timeframes where it's just me. Coming to the office obviously separates me physically from the house. My wife is a stay-at-home mom and does pet sitting as well. Carrie is at home all the time with Nolan unless we're at separate houses or something like that. But getting me into the office kind of separates me physically, which obviously that creates its own boundary by allowing me to focus on what I need to focus on. The other boundary is generally we have a shared calendar. And if the calendar is booked with me recording, she knows that. I put in big, bold letters, no TV, which kind of sets us apart a little bit of she's going to recognize that we can't be yelling by the door. And it's funny because my office is right across the hall from the washer dryer. And so even during that time frame, I'm like, you can't run the washer and dryer during that time frame. So just setting up these little boundaries has helped us tremendously. And again, over the course of 9 months, they've changed back and forth tremendously as well. So it's just a matter of setting up the boundaries that work and then trying them and sticking with them for a while. And if they do continue to work, then you stick with them. If they don't, you can adapt.
And I love the work-life harmony rather than work-life balance, right? Because there is a harmonic part of being able to separate. And the other thing too is obviously it's important to separate work and personal life. But the reality is, as an entrepreneur, as a hustler, someone that gets out there every day, you are inherently going to spend more time focusing on your business and the success of your business than you are spending time with your spouse or your kid. So I think what's important is the quality of time that we have rather than the quantity of time. Because let's face it, I'm up at 7 in the morning on my computer going through emails, for example, work until 6 p.m. I've got a 7 o'clock dinner with my wife, right? How many hours are we going to get in? A couple hours, 2 or 3 hours of time, maybe, before I'm passed out on the couch or in bed, wherever I end up. But the important part is when we're there, right? We want to focus on that time we have with our loved ones. For me, it's important to turn off our phones. Am I perfect at that? No. But I think it really is important to really shut down and be ever present in your relationship and your time that you have with your spouse. So great points there.
Recently, I've kind of adopted this micro moment strategy. So if we're not going to get unencumbered time, it just doesn't happen. You're a business owner. In real estate, it's constantly moving. It's weekends, it's nights. It's because other people have to be available to do their part of it, right? If I need to send out a pre-approval letter for a client that finds a house, sometimes that happens at 8 o'clock at night. Sometimes it happens at 7:30 in the morning, and sometimes anywhere in between there. So I'm really focusing on the micro moments, and it's recognizing when I do have unencumbered time, whether it's 5 minutes, 20 minutes, a half an hour, I'm putting the phone down, recognizing that I'm not getting this time back, right? I've got Nolan on my chest until he's won. And then after that, he's probably going to fight it a little bit. And so we even had a meeting yesterday scheduled, Jason, in the morning, and I was getting him down for his morning nap. And I had Carrie text you. And I said, like, this is where I'm at. I'm taking this moment because he's with me right now. I'm going to get him down for his nap, and then I will join the meeting. And it ended up only being 5-10 minutes later. So taking those micro moments and just making, recognizing them when you're in them instead of the age old time of you're going to miss this, right? I think the statistic is that generally we see our children 90% of the time we'll ever see them before they turn 18.
Yep, exactly. And so I have the opportunity to share my experience as well I've got 2 adult children, right? And so I was able to navigate through that and get to share with others my experience and how I was able to navigate and separate that harmonious idea of working, spending time with kids, spending time with my spouse. Because then now it's multi-layered, right? Now you got to figure out how to spend quality time with your wife and also spending time with your kids, because sometimes that can't be the same, right? There's certain things that we want to do with our wives that we can't maybe do when we have our children with us. So it becomes dynamic in that regard. And so I think it's important, which kind of leads me to my next question for you. Based on your experience so far, what advice would you give to, let's say, another driven professional who just has some fear, maybe they just can't be both exceptional in business and in their family life?
I don't think it's an or question. And I think that's where a lot of people will take this. And again, if we go back to the micro moments theory, we can call it micro moments of or, if we want to go with that, right? There are going to be moments where you have to choose between the two in the moment. And you're going to have to make sacrifices one way or the other. The question is, are you sacrificing great for excellent, or are you sacrificing something that is bad for something that's good? Decide what those sacrifices are. And sometimes you're going to have 2 things that feel of equal importance. Generally, I'm going to default to the family side on that, just because that's the more important piece. Without the family, the business doesn't really mean as much, right? If I'm looking back to my early days in mortgage or in real estate or in really any arena at all, I'm telling myself, design it the way you want to design it. And you don't have to fit your career into the box of the coach or the guru or the person that's telling you how to build your business. The moments that I've created a better business have come from when I've sat back and I go, if I'm looking back in 5 years, we're doing it with this question, what do I want to say to myself at this moment of time? Did I make the right decision? And so if you're looking at it in a lens of the future, and even, looking at the lens of the future, you're always going to make the right decision with the education or the knowledge that you had at that point in time. And that's all you can really do.
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I'll also add too, so with my wife and I, and she's also an entrepreneur and she's in the real estate world as well, is we had to make what we wanted a must. In other words, we didn't want to date each other again to keep that passion alive and to just keep us in a place of happiness when it came to our marriage. It was a must. So we would say, hey, we are going to go on a date once a month. That is a must. And that's the minimum, right? If we wanted to do extra, and we would do that. And so I think there has to be a hard line between the work-life balance, but at the same time, you have to be willing to talk about it again, because listen, let's face it, things change. when before we started this business, Ryan, I didn't have to put as many hours in as I am now. That's just the reality of growing a business, right? When you're starting a business from scratch, you're going to put a lot of focus into it. So luckily, we both have wives that understand what it takes to get to where we want to be and see the vision that we have as a company and as people that are growing something that I think is pretty special. So that's good to know from you. Anyway, we'll cut that part out. All right. So, Ryan, we've talked a little bit about how your spouse deals with you, and I want to dig into your marriage a little bit. Hopefully, make you squirm in your seat a little bit. But what do you think is one thing that Carrie understands about your journey that the outside world doesn't?
That every day can be a challenge. And I say that in a way of, a lot of times on social media, a lot of times it can look like this glorified scenario. I try to do my best and throw in some of the hardships as well and kind of teach people, like, I'm not perfect. I'm not excellent at most of the stuff you see. It's just me trying it in different ways, a bunch of different ways. But Carrie understands that every day for me can be a struggle. And we've talked before about my sobriety aspect. And some of that, I don't really struggle with not drinking anymore, but it's a way of, it can create different social environments for me because I'm not going out to the networking events where they're buying you a beer. For me, it's just not a comfortable environment because conversations change over time. And I recognize that people start to change after a couple hours at those events. And those conversations become stale for me, and I just don't enjoy that. So I'm trying to create an environment of growth every single day, of challenging myself if I'm not feeling challenged in the work that I'm doing. It's challenging myself to either get it done within a certain time frame or get it done for a certain way or a certain reason. And Carrie sees that and recognizes it. And oftentimes she's really good. She's great with Nolan about recognizing with Nolan that sometimes I can't take on the emotional aspect of caring for him as soon as I walk out the door. So she'll give me that separation time of that a lot of men need, right? We just need this break. A lot of times people talk about coming home from work and just sitting in the car for 5 minutes and just taking that break. And then that allows me to give a better focus. And I think once we got to the point of her realizing that, which came within a year or two after sobriety took over, once we got to that realization, she's all supportive of it and recognizes that that's the direction I want to take life and take our family.
And I love to be able to share the sobriety with you. And I think I can really relate to that because I'm a little over 2 years sober now. And I think after that first year and a half to 2 years, I really could see the difference in not only our relationship with each other, but my relationship with my business, my relationship with my clients, my ability to be more present in situations, and then just the amount of time I felt like I had to be more productive and do some other things that I wanted to do. I didn't realize, honestly, how much time it takes to hang out and drink. Think about the amount of hours you've sat around talking about nothing, right? I don't want to get off on a tangent here, but I think that it's important to understand that taking away from your business and your marriage and your loved ones and that all parts of life, you can be consumed in alcohol. And I know there's a lot of people nowadays I've seen on social media that are really glorifying the sobriety part of it. And I think it's an incredible thing to see. And so I'm happy for the people that have committed to that. So I've talked a little bit about what I've done, Ryan, to keep my marriage going strong, at least, and not just my marriage, also my family life, my children and things of that nature. And believe me, I'm flawed, right? I'm looking for opportunities to be better as a human, just in all phases of life. And one of the things that we do is we go out to dinner, right? We go and spend time, we watch Netflix together. Just little rituals and habits that we do. Anything else you want to share about, like maybe some habits that you've done to keep your relationship strong? You know, even when the business is like super demanding and taking everything from you, do you have musts? Do you have things that you need to do in order to keep that strong?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, and this is something Carrie has brought to our relationships. It's not something that I was accustomed to or really focused on because, you know, as we've talked about, I can get caught in the hustle and bustle and really just being goal determined and working nonstop and being okay with it and just sacrificing now for the future and not recognizing that you can't always sacrifice the now or you're never really living. She's done a very good job of pulling me back into the present. And one of the things that we do consistently, it's not every night, but as much as possible, is to eat dinner together every single night if it's possible. And there are nights like last night, even where we had an issue with our Jeep and the Jeep wasn't done until 5:30. Well, she eats between 5 and 5:30 every night. And so I'm not there. So she's got her ritual time, but last night didn't work out. But now tonight we put the focus back on it and we say, yes, we are going to eat dinner together. It's a bringing the entire family together type thing. That's kind of when Nolan's developed his time frame to eat dinner, and then we transition into bedtime. The other aspect, so that's with Carrie and the family. With Nolan, my goal every single night is to be able to put him to bed if I'm in town. And so that time frame from 6:30 to 8:30, where he's going down for sleep now, that's my time to really just be me and Nolan. And I focus on that as much as possible. And then the other time frame with him is the morning, because I want to give Carrie a little extra time to sleep in the morning. She's not a big morning person. So whatever time he wakes up in the morning, I'm up from that time frame till 8:30, and it's me and him. And I give him some time to play unencumbered by himself, which I think every child kind of needs, allowing him, not guiding his play, not restricting him, not saying no, just put him off to his own and just let him learn how to play on his own. So I give him that time frame. That usually lasts about a half an hour. And then during that time frame, we've talked about the multiply first. I'm taking that time with myself as well to dive into utilizing some of the AI tools and stuff like that can help me then streamline some of the processes so I can spend more time with the family down the line. So dual purpose there. But those are really the time frames that we've set apart for every single day to make sure that we're doing that on a regular basis.
And so being a new parent, when do you feel like you're being the parent that you essentially want to be? And what do you think kind of gets in the way of that?
I try to be the parent that I want to be at all times. I think what can get in the way is, and there's a lot of things can get in the way, right? And it's really a mental game at that point. It's what can you decide, or how can you decide in the moment of what type of person you want to be, with the ability to think clearly, as we've talked about with sobriety. That's come with a lot of time to think about who I would become as a father. And so I had 3 years of sobriety before Nolan was born. And that gave me the ability to literally design basically every step of the way. And obviously not the moments in between where things are going sideways and you're going to have issues, but it allowed me to develop the personality that I want at all times. And so with Nolan, being the parent that I want to be is considerably easier than it would have been had we had him 5-10 years ago, because it would have just been I would have been a completely different person, and I wouldn't have been able to do what I do now. And that's be able to guide him whatever direction he ends up wanting to go. And I'm never going to be the guy that's going to yell at this point. Everybody laughs when I say that, but they didn't have 3 years of sobriety before their child was born to literally decide who they're going to be. And I've always heard this story, being the parent that yells, and recognizing that if you're always the parent that yells, your child eventually develops the ability to tune you out. So eventually your voice can't go any louder and they will not hear you anyway. But if you're the parent that is always cool, calm, collected through scenarios, you're not freaking out, you're not providing a bunch of emotional instability for them, when you do yell in dangerous situations, they're going to go, oh, what's going on, right? It's that time frame when they just start to learn to run and they run towards the road and you yell for the first time, they're going to understand, I'm going into a dangerous situation, they're going to stop. But if you're constantly yelling, they're just going to start tuning you out. So I really use that story daily in my brain. I never want to be the guy that yells. And like I said, I've just been able to design the parent I want to be and been able to execute on that without any issues at all, because of sobriety helps with that, obviously being more consistent with the moods and your cloudiness of your brain and all of that. So.
And kids tend to emulate you, right? They tend to copy the way that you act. And so I've got a great story with my daughter, for example, is when she was getting to that age, that 11 to 12 and 13 years old, where they start to be a little bit rebellious and they push back a little bit. I was so upset with her all the time because of the way that she disrespected my wife and talked down to her older brother, Jordan. And I couldn't figure out what the deal was. And we were really parenting hard. And we really spent a lot of time together as a team trying to be better parents. What I learned from that experience is that she was emulating me. I was talking to my wife in a way that maybe was disrespectful in front of my kids, right? I was talking down or being rude to Jordan, and all she was doing was emulating the way I was reacting in my family. So when I started changing myself, I started seeing a change in my children. So I think that's a great point that you brought up, the ability to act a certain way so that your kid can become the person that you want them to be. And obviously they have their own personality, they have all their own things, but to have a good core family value centered for them and understanding how to act in certain situations, especially stressful situations or tough situations, it makes them stronger, better individuals in the long run.
Yeah, I think the part that comes behind that is our generation, your generation, the generation before that, the word discipline has been a negative connotation to it, right? Disciplining your child means yelling or sternly talking or hitting or however they went about it, right? Whatever they did at that time frame. And I've seen all of that turn into what it's turned into in a large majority of my family, of other small town families that don't get exposed to a bunch of different ways of parenting, and recognizing that it doesn't come out, more times than not, it doesn't come out the way you think it's going to come out if you're using those tactics, right? Because they're going to run away from those. Those are tactics that they don't want. They're bad for them, right? They want to run the other direction. And so when they turn 16 and get a driver's license, they're hanging out at their girlfriend's house all the time or their friend's house because they don't want to be at home. And so I don't want that scenario. I want my child to have a strong family bond and be able to trust me with whatever he or she, if we have another, trust me enough to come to me with those things and recognize that they've already learned the lesson by the repercussions from what they did. I can reinforce that lesson with words and with, helping them come to a realization of how that felt, and maybe they don't want it again. But I don't have to yell at them for something they did wrong, because you're just punishing them again for something they already went through. And I can harken back to a situation where when I was 16, I had my license at this point for 7 or 8 months, and I was running late for school, and I was driving my car, and I pulled out in front of somebody and I got hit and T-boned the car and totaled it, whatever. We ended up getting it fixed, but I couldn't drive it for a while. Exactly 2 weeks later, I was driving my mom's van, and it was snowing, and it had been freezing that day, ice, and I was running late, going home at night at 10:30, leaving my girlfriend's house, and the car slid out and I ended up hitting a tree. And I just remember the emotional aspect of, I just went through chaos, and my mom's response was, "I'll be right there. I'll come help you," instead of, "Why were you driving so fast? Why were you doing like that?" I didn't get that brutal response from somebody when I already had gone through the trauma. All that does is cement the trauma. But if you come with that supportive aspect to it, it allows the child to figure out their own emotion around it instead of thinking it's always bad and they should never do those things. And just, that's one of the scenarios that I look back to and go, that's how I want to be. I don't want to be yelling after they do something wrong, because they're already dealing with the consequences of it.
Right. Yeah. So Ryan, I had a totally different experience as a child. A lot of yelling, a lot of hitting, and I don't regret going through that, actually, because it made me who I am today. And it actually helped me learn how to be a better parent. Kind of trial by fire, though. I started when I was in my 20s. And so I wasn't as mature and wasn't as, I guess, dialed in to be the person that I wanted to be. I was still heavy into alcohol abuse. I was not very present as a husband. I'm actually super grateful that my wife even stuck with me. I think going through that experience with her actually helped us as well become the unit that we've become and become good parents that we've become. And the beautiful thing about hearing from my daughter, for example, she has friends, they come over, we spend a lot of time with their friends, and we talk to my daughter on a daily basis. My son, he works the next office over, so we're very close. And it's always wonderful to hear their friends saying, "Wow, your parents have such a good relationship." Whereas just a couple of years ago, we were on the verge of collapse. And so I want people that are hearing this to know that, listen, we're not perfect. This is something that we keep falling forward on, just like in business. We're trying to be better husbands. We're trying to be better parents. We're trying to be better business owners. And the only way that I can do that is to recognize what I'm doing wrong, learn from other people that have gone through those experiences, and use that to benefit my future and my present. So I think that's all I got for today, Ryan. What you got anything else to add about this work-life balance or work-life harmony, as you call it, before we wrap up the show?
Just obviously, we're kind of a business-based concept here with the Beyond the Guidelines and being able to recognize that humans do exist in business. We're not robots, right? The thing that I'd love to do is bring back what we just talked about that doesn't seem like it's business focused, and help everybody recognize that even though it doesn't seem business focused, it's very easily applied to business, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that was coming to mind while we were both talking about our journeys through marriage and parenting is recognizing that marriage and parenting are partnerships and employees, right? You and I in the last 11 months have come so far in just the way that we're able to talk to each other, and recognizing the way you hear things aren't necessarily the way I say things and vice versa. And recognizing that we're going to say some stupid stuff, and we're going to recognize afterwards that we said some stupid stuff. And we've both come to this agreement that if we say something stupid and we recognize it, we're not going to hold that, right? We're going to come back to the other person and go, hey, I really shouldn't have said that. My bad. And we move on from it. And
we're like newlyweds. We're like newlyweds.
It's so funny to be able to tie it back to that, but that's work-life harmony, right? That's what I like to talk about in this arena. Is it's not always going to be sunshine and rainbows. And there's, been matches where I guarantee we both got off the phone and we both went to our wives and we're like, I'm done. Like, this guy sucks. What are we doing? And then the next day we hashed it out and we just figured it out. And then the parenting aspect of the employee aspect, every employee that you're going to bring into your environment is going to be different. And sometimes we've learned that especially quickly because we brought somebody in that is managing a majority of the process for us now. And we were speaking to him in two different languages, right? And you and I had to come up together and go, so how do we streamline this into one message? And instead of one in the right ear and one in the left ear, we're both bringing it together now and having the same message. And I think parenting obviously symbolizes that, where you both have to decide this is the message we're going to push, and that's what you do instead of having separate ones.
And we're always just getting pulled in different directions, right? It's like we're always running to one thing and we're trying to be proactive, but a lot of times we have to be reactive. And that's just the learning curve of, number one, starting a business with a new partner. And then number two, aligning the vision that we want to have for our future, being in an environment that people get attracted to, right? The same way that we do with our spouses. Every high achiever that I've ever talked to is trying to figure out what it looks like to win in both worlds. And the truth is, it's less about balance and more about intentionality. So I hope today's conversation gave you permission to slow down, be present, redefine what success looks like in your home, not just in your headlines. So if this resonated with you, share it with someone who needs this reminder, and let's keep having the real conversations that matter. Thanks, everyone.